The following presentation was recorded live at the CALLERLAB's 20th Annual Convention. This is tape number 5, Smoothness and Timing.
Hopefully that won't mean you will have trouble seeing us when we're talking, but you guys might want to move in. There's a lot more here and sort of more of a cluster group and almost, you know, not a big formal presentation, but just a nice get together and let's talk. We'll get started at this point. My name is Don Beck, and I'm going to be the moderator of this panel. And maybe we'll leave the center seat for whoever is talking because of the length of the mic cable. This session, well, the whole convention is on improving the dance experience. Is it, you know, what does that mean? Well, hopefully we'll all have a better feel by the end of the convention. But just summarizing real quickly in my mind as I was trying to think of some brief introductions before I put our speakers on, is that improving the dance experience is making the dancers feel better. Some of the things that go into this are sort of subtle movements. The points that we're going to talk about here in this session, which are smoothness, are kind of subtle movements compared to choreography or showmanship. They're small things that dancers aren't going to come up and say, wow, that was great. If you screw up on some of these points, they may notice it. It's sort of like you don't notice the light was on until somebody turns it off. You don't notice there was a background noise until somebody stops it. These are the kind of things we're going to be talking about. So some callers wonder, is it really worth putting the effort into this because you don't get the instant feedback of these are great. But the net effect, the long run of this, is you do improve the dancer's experience, the dancing experience. And dancers in the long run will leave your dance saying, I had a good time, that felt good. It's okay in square dancing to let the dancers dance, to actually move with the music instead of just do puzzle solving. So even though some of the type of things we're talking about are subtle, they are worth doing, worth pursuing. Typically when people think of smoothness, at least I've noticed this over many years, is that they tend to think of body flow. And yes, body flow is an important ingredient of smoothness. But to make a dance really smooth, it's got to include body flow, proper timing, proper hand availability, proper tempo, proper degree of difficulty. You got to worry about how slippery the floor is. You got to worry about the phase of the moon. There are a lot of things that go into this to make it all work out and be smooth, and they're all worth it. One of the things, there have been a lot of sessions about body flow and some about some of these other things. One of the things that hasn't been touched on too much, and I'm sort of jumping ahead or an aside here, but one of the items not talked about too much has been tempo. How fast the music goes, where you set the crank on your turntable. And in preparation for thinking about body flow and smoothness, rather, for the CALLERLAB Convention, a few callers got together. November, you said it was, Jerry? Thank you. There's an in-joke as to why Jerry's laughing. I got together a group of callers, 5 callers in the New England area, ones that we decided to have a workshop on tempo, to decide what feels good, what doesn't. Is fast tempo good, slow tempo? We got together some of the top callers in New England who were known to call either quite slow, quite in the middle, quite fast. And we got together about 3-4 squares of dancers, and we actually spent an evening talking about it, trying different things, and the results were quite interesting. Shawn happened to be one of those callers. I found a hall very conveniently, a half a mile down the road from where I live. Shawn lives a quarter mile in the other direction, so it was quite convenient for him, too. Probably these two guys over here are going to talk a little bit more about tempo than Shawn and I are, ironically. Jim Mayo was one of the callers that we gathered into that, and Jim wrote a very nice summary of what transpired there and sent a copy to Jerry for other reasons, and Jerry got inspired reading that and wants to talk about it. I'll keep it a little at the end. But we're going to talk tonight, this afternoon, more than just tempo. We're going to talk about some of these other components too. I'm not going to talk about them. I've spoken too much already. I'm going to talk just a little bit more, and that's to introduce the panel that will be talking to you. And in the order they're going to be talking to you, in starting my left, this young gentleman, I still think of him as just a kid because I've known him for a number of years. And when I was asking him about things that I could use for the introduction, he blew my mind telling me that he's been calling for 18 years already. He, like myself, is from Stowe, Massachusetts. Square dance-wise, calls for a lot of local clubs, but he's also gotten very helpful in our local square dancing political scene. Is currently vice president of the Square Dance Foundation of New England. In his non-square dance life, he's a graphics designer and has a background in communications. Last year at the CALLERLAB Convention, I think he was honored, and rightfully so, for something he's did for all of us by receiving the Chairman's Award for the designing the recruitment brochure that we've been using for a year or two. Let's have a big hand for Shawn Cuddy. On my far right, your far left, a gentleman from Jacksonville, Florida. Jerry's been calling for 14 years and calls various programs from mainstream through A2, gives them a good broad view of the different scope of things. I got to watch out how I word this. He has a real life too. He, other than square dancing, works for Lockheed Missiles and Space Company as a technical writer. Has done a great service for CALLERLAB recently with the as being chairman of the Choreographic Applications Committee and helping edit the final copies of the manual that they put out. Let's have a big hand for Jerry Reed. And to my immediate right, from Beaumont, Texas, Wayne's been calling for 26 years. And this is the part I had to be careful of, because Wayne's real life is the one that I think many of us wish we had, and that's his real life is the same as his hobby, whatever we call it. Wayne is a full-time caller. I think some of us are envious of that, and others are relieved that we're not. And as a result, has time for lots of wonderful square dance-related activities. He's written a book called Get Outs. He edits a choreographic note service called Mechanics of Choreography. He's owner and producer of Rocking M and Stampede record labels. And he's one of the accredited caller coaches of CALLERLAB. Let's have a big hand for Wayne Morvent. And with that, we're going to let Shawn take over the mic and probably the middle chair so you don't get tied in the cord here.
Good afternoon. How y'all doing? I want to thank you for being here and thank CALLERLAB for asking me to give my 2 cents this afternoon. As Don mentioned, I am a graphic designer, and I think I approach the aspect of calling in a little bit different of an angle. In fact, I kind of think it's ironic. We talk about a dance experience, but for us as callers, I don't see it as a dance experience. For me, it's a visual experience. For me, standing from the stage, in much the way I work at a drawing board, I'm looking at shapes, and I'm looking at composition, and I'm looking at flow. It's this type of creative vision, and I'm going to give you two that I hope you can see, that can help you into achieving a balance and a way to see flow for the evening or a evening. I'm looking at a visual experience. I'm seeing shapes. I'm also seeing synchronicity. There's a three-dimensional aspect to calling. They're moving in front of you to a beat, hopefully. It's a communication experience because I have to give them in some type of correct mode an understanding so that they can execute it with that beat, with that movement. Those are the things that keep me interested in calling. It isn't just the dancing, it's the communication process. What do I have to say to get them to move the way I want them to move? And hopefully it'll feel good. The two types of vision, it's a difference between looking at the single square in front of you because you want to resolve that square, and looking at the whole room when you let them loose and say, put your hands up high and weave. There's an expressiveness to that. And I want to get out of their way enough that they're going to have a good time being expressive that night. What's the balance? How much do I get in there and do all this complicated choreography stuff with? And how much do I just let them back and let them reign? It's kind of like seeing the forest for the trees. You got to know which one is which and which one you're focusing on and where to back off. And it isn't the same every night. There's a rhythm. There's a communication between you and that audience that develops. So a premise, at least for me, for improving the dance experience would be envisioning the dance as a continuum. Now, by that I mean from the time that they acknowledge each other to the time that they give their final honors that night, there's got to be some type of flow in the evening. There's a flow to the tip. There's a flow from one tip to the next tip. And you get into aspects of programming with that. Webster's gives you a definition for a continuum as a continuous extent, succession, or whole that no part of which can be distinguished from neighboring parts except by arbitrary division. In prior talks that I've listened to, we've heard people describe this continuous flow as letting them feel the wind against their face. I've also heard one individual describe the thing that's happening in front of you. If you could have it videotaped, turn the music down, turn the volume down, and just watch what's happening. Kind of lose sight of where the call starts and where the call ends. For me, that's not important. Calling, for me, is watching this continual flow, this weave. I like occasionally to envision the floor as a time-lapse piece of photography. I'm going to take a snapshot, but I'm going to look at the path or the shadow that they're leaving behind, that they're kind of weaving and crossing paths in. I know that's kind of an abstract thought, but I think it's much easier to see that I'm the gatekeeper. I'm controlling the faucet. I want all that fluid to just keep moving. Now, somebody who's controlling, the keeper of the floodgates, and for me, who's controlling it properly, is never going to give you a full stop. In other words, my time-lapse photography, I'm never going to see a full view, 100% exposure of somebody. They're always going to be panning in motion. It's another way to look at it. The approach for that, for me, is to identify the observable movement as something fluid rather than mechanical. And I say observable because there's a variable there. Our audiences are not all the same. Given their ages, given their abilities and skill levels, sometimes we have to rein back from what we know might be proper timing, but if we hold back, the body flow is much better for this particular group. Maybe they don't move as quick. And that is an aspect of really self-projection. You've got to be looking at them and almost feeling, as their muscles move, when to give the next cue, when to give the next command. Does that mean that I shouldn't become complex with choreography? I don't think so. It means that I have to play up the other aspect of my ability as a communicator and be a little bit more sensitive to them so that you're describing the formations and the structures that they're in, that you're giving them some type of forum, something to hang on to, that we're setting the context. And I have a short story for you that I'd like to read before I go on. I titled it Setting the Stage. One of the regulars at the High Steppers Barn had spent many years in prison. And in the first year, he succeeded in remaining relatively sane. But in the second year, he began to go completely stir-crazy. But he was saved by the appearance of a little colony of ants making their way across the cell floor. He put a piece of paper in front of the ants, and they climbed on. He found a box of matches and took out the matches, and he kept the group of 8 ants inside the box. He made a little bed and some furniture for the group, and he put them in the matchbox with the group. Each day he would take the ants out and place them on the piece of paper for their exercise. He became rather captivated with their irregular scramblings and patterns, which they tracked around the paper, for the ants gave him an idea. Sketching the basic moves on paper, he could orchestrate their trackings and teach them to square dance. The family of ants that he had named the Durhams became more than just pets. The Durham ants represented an opportunity for him to really make a comeback in life, to give his life new meaning. With the right promotion of this microscopic square dance act, he could even become a millionaire. Sounds familiar. He taught the Durhams every call he could think of. Careful to fully explain the geometry and formations, they could alamand and do-sa-do with the best of exhibition teams. The Durhams were so intelligent that they could answer elementary problems in mathematics. They could add and subtract. They could even multiply and divide and do a few fractions. By the time he was released from prison, his pet ants, the Durhams, could almost speak. Finally, the day of his release arrived. He was given $5 and a new suit of clothes. He put on the suit of clothes, pocketed the $5, and very carefully carried the matchbox with the Durhams inside in one hand, and in the other pocket he placed their repertoire of sketches. He could hardly wait to get to the High Steppers' barn to show his friends his spectacular square of dancers. He knew they had never seen anything like it before. After all, who has the time to train ants to dance? Yeah, I lost my place. Ants to dance to such a degree. It takes years of intensive training, hour after hour, day after day. When he entered, he was so happy to see his old friends and grateful that Arnie hadn't sold the barn to someone else. He only had $5, and he knew Arnie wouldn't charge him too much to dance since he had just gotten out of prison. He even thought of a way to get out of paying altogether. The Durhams could perform on the refreshment table. He carefully pulled out the sketches and he arranged them on the table in an elementary sequence in a circle about 10 centimeters. He then opened the matchbox containing the Durhams, and very carefully he guided the dancing Durhams out to the matchbox and placed them on the square on the table. "Hey, everybody, come see this," he announced. Everybody gathered around. He said, "Arnie, do you see those ants?" "No problem," said Arnie, grinding his hand down on the table and making jelly out of those ants below and innocently brushing them clean. "I got the filthy little things." Why wasn't our convict successful in his presentation? How often do we expect to see ants on the refreshment table? He didn't set his stage. He gave his audience no clue of what was about to come next, no perceptual clue. What I'm trying to get across here is that when we set dancers up, and we set them up in formations that are a little bit different than usual, and we expect them to be able to execute calls that we know are basic, they may need a little extra help. They may need a little extra cue. And we have to be aware that we're the ones giving them depth cues. Them depth cues. You got that on tape, too. So if we theme for the dancer's body flow, we need to recognize that we have to set the stage. As leaders, we set the context. We tell them where they're at. It's not enough to presume that the dancing level, mainstream plus whatever it is elementary enough. Some audiences have a handle on the basic calls, but they can't see the overall structure. We have the perspective. We can see up there. We're looking down on the floor most of the time. They may require a strong lead if we're trying to stretch them during the evening. Hopefully our dance program is going to go somewhere, but we want to give them enough of a cue to actually physically lead them. And so we want to attempt to deliver the best perceptual cues so they can recognize formation more readily. And I'd like to give you some examples choreography-wise so that you know I just haven't been speaking here for 10 minutes and had nothing really to say. If I could get a square up, we'll demonstrate a couple of things. Yeah, we could use some ladies if we have them. And this is a caller's dream. All right, my heads, you're going to have your back here to the sound, please. Not to your caller. Just to look underneath, please. Just something elementary right now, because I'm leading somewhere. Join hands. I got a little bit of control here. Honor your partner. Honor your corner. Circle to the left. Now reverse back, go single file. Ladies, you know who you are. Ladies, step out, take a backtrack for me. Ladies, the second time you meet him, the second time, do a do-si-do. Take his hand, promenade back home. Hit, join hands, circle to the left. Now reverse back, go single file, the other way back. Here we go again, ladies. Ladies, step out, take a backtrack. Ladies, second time you meet him, shake hands, and keep going in the direction you're going, and shake hands with everybody. Right and left, grand, in and out, girls. When you meet him, do a do-si-do. Take his hand and promenade till you get him back home. Back home, when you're there, what you observed was some type of progression where we stretched a little. On the basic evening introduction to square dancing, that might be an appropriate way to move people from a circling and a single file into a right and left grand. If it's an introduction, most likely I would stop the music and give them a moment's breather so that they would know what the setup was, that they were going from two circles, one inside the other, to a circle that weaved and shook hands. Music. Something a little bit more complicated to make the point. Head couples up to the middle and back. Head couples square through 4. With the outside pair, touch a quarter. Scoop back. And the boys trade. Everybody star through. Now trade by. Swing through. And the boys run, the ladies trade. Do your Ferris wheel. Zoom and center, square through 3. Find your corner, a la man left. Come back promenade till you get her back home. Did anybody notice anything about flow in there for a moment? Anything unusual? The boys trade was a little bit more complex than what we might be used to. Therefore, I failed, because the minute they did the scoop back and you had boys facing out, you saw what I call the vaudeville shuffle. There was a double take left and right, and then these guys trying to stumble to get to the other side. Now, if I was a little bit more sensitive to their need, to their formation, and I wanted to see that flow executed better, it might go something like this. Head couples, square through, go for it. Touch a quarter. Scoop back, check a wave. Scoop back, check a wave. Scoop back, check a wave. Boys facing out, walk forward and trade. 2 lines, dance up to the middle and back. Star through. Trade by. Swing through. And the boys run, and the ladies trade. Do your Ferris wheel. And the center zoom. New center square through 3. Fine corner, a la man left. Promenade her till you get her back home. Back home when you're there. The flow, I sacrificed timing, but they didn't lock up their knees. When they got to that point where the boys were facing out, I gave them the perceptual cue for a moment. I recognized that I sacrificed the timing, but I wasn't so damaging to them physically. It was smoother in essence. From here, I now have something to work with. I gave them that cue. We did a scoop back 3 times. Why the heck would somebody do a scoop back 3 times? I must be leading to something. You're telling the audience that, not only with the action, but hopefully you're hearing it in his voice. Where might I go with that? Once again, maestro. 4 ladies chain, 3/4. Head couples, square through 4. Touch a quarter. Scoop back. Scoop back again. Check away. Scoop back one more time. Boys, you're looking out. Do that trade, boys. Everybody up to the middle and back. Straight across. Turn through. Come back in courtesy turner. 2 lines up to the middle and back. Past the ocean. Swing through here. And the boys run. Now tag your line. Ladies go left. Men go right to the corner. A la man left. Come back promenade. Back home when you're there. Was it the fact that you were a lady, or was it the fact that the cue wasn't given in time? The get out, I'll address separately. We went somewhere from the scoop back to a line that wasn't normal or felt funny because she was on the wrong side. I went a little bit further because I had them do a turn through and come back and courtesy turn somebody. 2 calls that used to be a call that I guess are still a call in a list, maybe somewhere in the dictionary. But can be done very easily to resolve them and get them back to that feeling normal. One more time, gentlemen, if you'll bear with me. The idea here is that I've had them done a scoop back 3 times, and the ladies have been active, so I want to do something with those ladies. Head couples touch a quarter. Boys run. Everybody touch a quarter. Scoop back. Gentlemen, you're going to trade while the ladies scoop back. Ladies, when you meet them, touch a quarter. Gentlemen trade in the center twice. And the gentlemen run. Do your Ferris wheel. Zoom. Center square through 3. To your corner, a la man left. Promenade till you get her back home. He said it was a sex problem, but I'll tell you that it wasn't a sex problem. It's that we went from a slow base, what was basic, rather rapidly to things that were more complex than they had time to absorb. And they're pretty educated dancers. And I hope they're not too angry with me. One last thing. Yeah. We did, a minute ago, we did a ladies go left and a gent go right and find your corner. Yes, sir. Let's set it up again. Head couples lead to the right. Circle up 4. Do your past the ocean. Swing through. And the boys run. Tag your line. Ladies go left, gent go right to the corner. A la man left. Promenade. When you know it's coming. As the lady. Okay, I'm not following you. All right. You need practice.
I'd like to throw in that I believe this session is being taped, and so those people on the tape have no idea what you guys are talking about. First of all, for those listening on the tape, our square is made up of 4 gentlemen, and so some of the comments you're hearing may be relative. And their 4 partners are also gentlemen. Is that better? 8 gentlemen standing out there, and some of them are making abrupt changes in the direction they would have if they were dancing the other part. And we're discussing a question of one area that may or may not have been smooth, depending on whether we were aware of which part we were dancing. We're going to look at it one more time.
I'd like to illustrate one more thing about stretching. Could I have the heads lead right circle to a line for me? Past the ocean. Do a linear cycle. And a right and left grand. Promenade till you get her back home. That type of timing, that type of choreography is not my favorite. But if I stretch the idea of a continuum, and I'm not so concerned about where they start and where they end, it could flow nicely. Head couples lead to the right, circle up 4. 2 lines up to the middle and back, past the ocean. Do a linear cycle to a right hand shake with your partner, right and left grand. I gave them the cue that allowed them to flow into the movement, and I wasn't so uptight over exactly where the call ended. And it opens up a whole new avenue of modifying calls. And there are a lot of gimmicky things out there that do it. Gimmicks are fine, but again, it's the delivery of and allowing them the right cue so that they can maneuver their body into the right position for that flow. Thank you, gentlemen. In closing, for me anyway, we did talk, or Don talked a little bit about tempo. I want to move from there to the aesthetics. And movement through space is called locomotion. And the tempo, the rate of speed that we're playing that music at, influences the type of step. When we walked away from that workshop that Don related to earlier, the strongest thing that I walked away with was not necessarily how fast or how slow anybody moved, but the type of step that they were taking. The rate of speed, if it's faster, they're closing up their ranks in their step. If the rate of speed is slower, you're allowing them an opportunity to really stretch, creating different types of steps. We have a shuffle, a walk, a glide, a march, or a run, depending on the tempo. What does that say about the music you're using and how you're varying the tempo? Certain music, for me, has an innate expressiveness to it. As somebody, and Don tends to tell me that I'm known for calling rather fast, even though I don't see it at times, I sat there saying, gee, I really like what these other guys are doing with their tempo, because I liked seeing that glide, that step that the dancers were doing. Something for thought. Dancers seem happiest when they experience large looping arcs through space. That is, you want to try to avoid movements that require dancers to fold in upon themselves, to turn around. Sharp turns aren't always pleasing in dance. They're happiest when they have this effortless feeling. You're the one in control. You're just making them move. That their legs are freely lubricated and could just come right out of the sockets if they were just allowed to move on. And the final form of appreciation is appreciation of the group dynamic. When your tip is over, and they're standing there conversing about that tip, and they're excited about what they just done, there's a recognition that there was something magical about what you just did with that movement. If it takes you 10 or 15 minutes to get them out of the hall at night because they're still excited, you did something wonderful with them. And we need to focus on trying to give them more of that there's a playfulness to the recreation. Finally, in the handout, there's an exercise, there's a worksheet that I've given you. And it's a method that I use. Choose a single call and establish it as your focus. Give it a prefix and a suffix, a different one each time. And try to come up with a list to vary your starting formation and your ending formation. I'm not so concerned when I do this exercise as to the arrangement of dancers. Again, I'm only interested in the mechanics of the call to a point. I want to see what type of a pattern I'm creating on the floor. After about the first 5, you start to struggle for what's the next one that I can give them? What else can I make up? It becomes good material for you to go from there, to really sit down and look at the arrangement of dancers and see how you can make it work. I'll also challenge you that there are 3 flaws in what I've just given you here. I'm hoping that if you like solving puzzles, you'll go through and do a little brain work and maybe get into that mode, that exercise of coming up with still one more. I'll leave a markup at the registration desk for those of you who are interested in where the flaws are. And if you come up with one of your own during this creative process, I'll leave a blank sheet there. Add it to the list. Let's see how many we can make up. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Shawn. One of the things that I failed to say at the beginning was that these gentlemen may be talking about things overlapping each other. One of the things we're going to have the opportunity here is hearing different sides, different opinions, different approaches to the same problem, and hopefully can learn from that. Got a question? The question is, what's the minimal number of beats to give before a command call so that dancers can comprehend and do it? Let me throw that in while Jerry's throwing his things out, even though we haven't really stressed timing here. That's a timing function. But I'd say it depends on the dancers, depends on the body flow, depends on the call, depends on how familiar they are with it. Anywhere from half a beat to 4 beats, depending on what you're doing. I mean, the standard word is 2 beats, but in fact it changes as a function of what your choreography is and how you're calling, whether your dancers trust you. I just realized that when I introduced these gentlemen, I told them that it was in the order, told you guys it was in the order that they're going to speak, and yet I had told them earlier they were going to speak in a different order. You guys care? Wayne, take it.
Oh, Jerry, is this your turn? Geez, he believes everything we say. Thank you, Don. Mary had a little. Lammett's fleece was white as snow and everywhere. Mary went. The lamb was sure too. Go. Smoothness is a perception. That may have been smooth to some of you. Some listening to the tape may have no idea what in the world was going on at that period of time. Smoothness is a perception. And it is truly the perception of the dancers. It's the dancer's perception, what is smooth and what is not smooth. There are many things that we can do to improve this perception of the dancers as to what is smooth. And one of the things that I will go into, or the things that I will go into primarily in this session, will be using timing and tempo in smoothness. It's so very difficult to isolate any one item as being the major factor in smoothness. Again, I'll be looking at timing and tempo, but it is hard to even isolate within that where the perception of smoothness is. There are just too many factors that are involved in there. One of the factors that is involved is the rhythm. rhythm or the beat is a steady and predictable cadence. That means we're getting a boom, 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 boom. We're setting a cadence, and we want to allow the dancers to dance to that cadence, which means they are going to progress from one beat to the next without a stop throughout the movement. We want to continue our cadence so that the dancers can dance to that cadence. Tempo is the speed of the rhythm. Even if we slow the speed of the record down, we slow the cadence down from boom, 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 boom to boom, boom, boom. We still have the rhythm, which is the steady cadence. It's simply at a slower speed. Our normal speed for square dancing is, as Don said, I think 124 to 130 is a stretch on the high end, metronome beats per minute. Other things, timing in our square dancing is the relationship between the call and the action of the dancers, measured in beats of music. So there are so many things that are involved in what becomes a perception on the dancer's part of smoothness that it's very hard to isolate any one factor. I've heard in all the years that I've been square dancing, and I heard my dear father, who is no longer square dance calling, say time and time again, don't anticipate. And I've come to wonder if that was really what he was telling the dancers. If he was telling the dancers what he really meant. I've looked in depth at what anticipation means, and I think that in a way we do want the dancers to anticipate. We simply don't want them moving before we give them a call. But we need to give them a call at a certain period in the phrase of the music so that they can get it before they ever stop. Okay? There are several definitions of anticipation. One I found that I like very much. Anticipation is a pleasurable expectation. I certainly want that on the part of my dancers. I want them to have a pleasurable expectation. Ways that we can talk about is an encouraged anticipation. And some of the ways that we can do that is by our rhythm, which is our steady cadence, is don't give them stop and go dancing. Give them a steady, predictable cadence that they're going to take a step on each beat of the music. In a lot of caller training, the problem I find to the largest degree with losing the cadence is that the callers are not properly aware of formation and arrangement management. They must see where the dancers are going to end up before they know what they're allowed to call next. Therefore, the dancers are going to stop at the end of each movement that they've completed. We need, as callers, to know exactly what arrangement, what formation the dancers will end up in before they get there so that we can give them the next movement 2 beats prior to them getting to that position. And this will give us our pleasurable or our encouraged anticipation that we're going to continue on this cadence without a stop. Another definition of anticipation was having intuition or presence of. Again, this brings to mind to me a forward movement. They have a presence of mind. I'm going to continue moving forward or rotating this direction. I'm not going to move here, stop, and turn around and go the other way. A lot of this we could summarize as being rotational flow or forward movement. I watched dancers one night as I was calling in a series that works very well from a line I called pass-through, partner, trade, and reverse flutter wheel. Dropped my whole floor. I had them moving at a beautiful pace. I had done a lot of movements, brought them over to a zero box or to their corner position called star through, go up to the middle, pass through, partner, trade. They're all flowing at a steady cadence, and I said, and the whole floor dropped. Reverse flutter wheel. That reverse, I'm not going to take the time to put you in a square. If you'd like to see how bad that is, do that for your dancers. The and took up time. They should have been finished with this flutter wheel or reverse flutter wheel. If I had called pass through, partner, trade, reverse flutter wheel, they would have been able to stay on their steady and predictable cadence, which is their instinctive anticipation that they were going to have the same rotational flow rather than a crossing action for the boys. Another definition of anticipation is causing to occur earlier than in the normal course of events. This is the anticipation that we don't want the dancers to exercise, okay? This is conditioned anticipation. And we get these types of anticipation by calling the same routine over and over. A cast-off is obviously going to be after a center's in. That is conditioned anticipation. Or a boy's run is obviously part of a swing through. That is conditioned anticipation. And if you don't believe that, from a normal wave called swing through and boys trade. And you may find that you've got some real problems. They will already be half around the girls doing a boy's run. This is what we do not want the dancers to do. We have many ways that we can prevent that. Giving them the proper call on the proper timing will work for that. Using gimmicks compromises the timing, almost always will stop this steady cadence that the dancers are dancing at. And I wrote down my favorite bad figure. From a line, go right and left through, go right and left grand. That is, to me, that is the most terrible thing that ever happened to square dancing. That is just, they're already through with another right and left through, and the dancers believe you have tricked them because you have. It was not a matter of them not being able to do the movement. You have in fact tricked them, and that sometimes makes them unhappy. Rhythm, or the beat, this is what we want to call on. We want to call on beat. We need to bear in mind the dancers want to dance on beat as well. So we need to keep our cadence constant so that they can keep their cadence on beat. We usually pay a little more attention to rhythm when we're doing phrase calling than we do when we're doing prompt calling. And this is something else that I could demonstrate, but I don't think I'm going to get into time of that. Moving into tempo. Tempo is the speed of the rhythm, and we work from 124 to 130 metronome beats per minute. Giving thought to that, at 124 beats per minute, the dancers are taking more than 2 steps every second. These dancers are moving at a very steady clip, folks, and stops and backups and quick turns, not only uncomfortable to dance, they can get hurt doing that. Considering 130 beats, they're taking 130 steps per minute. They're moving at a considerable clip there. Using tempo to increase or improve the dance experience, there are things we can do with tempo depending on what our programming is, our programming goals. A slower tempo, I find, works better for classes. I might set it down to 124. Or if I'm doing workshops, a learning environment, or if I'm doing some very creative choreography, I'm getting into some odd arrangements or formations, I'll probably work at a slow tempo. A crowded floor will give me another reason to work at a slow tempo. An older age group will give you reason to work at a slower tempo. If I'm prompt calling, I will usually work at a slower tempo, but if I'm prompt calling, I'm usually working more choreography than when I'm phrase calling. When I go to a little higher tempo or a little faster speed is when I have very skilled dancers who have hired me in to do a specific type of program. They've hired me to do a plus DBD program or an advanced program, and they're very skilled at their level of dancing or at the level they have advertised for this dance. I will probably go to 127 to maybe 130. I seldom get much over 128. Very easy choreography, I may go at a higher tempo. We used to call these hot hash sessions when I'm doing very easy choreography, but we're moving at a very good clip. very young dancers, I find often teenagers, they like to dance at a higher tempo, at a greater tempo, and they do very well. When I'm phrase calling, I will normally opt for phrase calling when I've got a quicker tempo, because phrasing helps me with timing. It gives me a little extra leverage on timing. I don't think that I need to demonstrate tempo as being the speed of the rhythm or the cadence, so I will go past that. Timing is the relationship between the command and the actions measured in metronome beats per minute. The goal of good timing is to give the command, have the dancers comprehend the command, and step off on the first beat and move to completion without interruption. This is a very, very large goal. Perfect timing in dancing is people moving to music. That is perfect timing in dancing. Once you give a command, perfect timing is lost. Your first command, perfect timing, is lost. They are not dancing any longer to that music, they're dancing to your commands. And so the best timing you can get, you have lost perfect timing as soon as you start. Hopefully we'll stay as close to it as possible. There are things in timing that we need to consider, and that's command time. Command time is the number of beats it takes for you to give the command to the dancers. Swing through can be given in one beat. You were asking what's the minimum amount of command time or not command time, you were talking lead time. It depends on how long it takes to give that command is one of those factors. If I'm calling a swing through, or if I should, instead of say single hinge, if I just said hinge, there's a half beat it took me to give that command, as opposed to if I'm giving the command spin, chain, and exchange your gears. Okay. Obviously, if I'm giving that command, I'm going to have to increase my lead time just to get the words out. So that's a very, very fluid, a very variable item there. 1 to 2 beats prior to them ending the last movement is normally considered the best place for them to receive the command. Okay? That gets into lead time, which I consider also dancer comprehension time. The dancers have to comprehend what you want them to do. They have to comprehend the command. Lead time is the number of beats elapsing between the command and the dancer reaction to the command. They start the movement. Okay? They need to comprehend the command, know what they're doing, and start moving to execute that command. We need to give the command in a place, remembering the dancers are very, very busy. They are very busy when they're square dancing. They're taking more than 2 steps per second. They need to hear the command clearly. They need to comprehend what that command means to them. They need to execute the command, and while they're doing this, they need to listen so that they can receive the next command before they finish with this one. The dancers are extremely busy, and they're moving very quick. So we need to give them the best help that we can. Some effects of poor lead time, if we give a late command, obviously we get stopping to go dancing. We give them a command, they too late for them to start before they get stopped from the last one. Am I running in? I need to, about 5 minutes. I'm going to get on a quick pace. Okay, early command, the dancers are rushing. Stacking calls. I hear a lot about stacking calls. In stacking calls, understand you may allow the dancers the number of beats it takes to execute that command, but they don't believe you're going to, because you're telling them star through, pass through, trade by, star through. You may wait and allow them all the beats it takes to execute those commands, but they don't think you're going to, and they're going to get in a dead run. So stacking calls, even though they're not going to be rushed, they will perceive that they're rushed. And again, this is what smoothness is, a perception on the dancer's part. Factors influencing lead time, your choice of words, your meter, how you give the words. Listening for the next command. If during a singing call, one of the ways that you can give a command, if you call head square through, make a right hand star, as opposed to head square through, star right. I will almost promise you, you got a star through just then. You did not get a right-hand star. You got a star through when you say star right as opposed to make a right-hand star. So the way that you say things is going to make a tremendous difference on the smoothness of the dance. I'm getting to the end here real quick, Don. Their formation and comprehending their formation, which Shawn covered quite a bit there, and I will go across that pretty well. I just believe that one of our best places to work as callers is formation arrangement awareness, so that we can give them the sufficient lead time that they need. Dancer training. Please consider dancer training. How experienced these dancers are. Are we maintaining the level that we were hired to call at? Or are we giving these dancers choreography from a different level? Dancer training in exact definitions of the call. If you call lines go up and back and seesaw, you're probably going to break down the entire floor. But I'm sure all of us as experienced callers know this seesaw is defined in our definitions as a left shoulder do side do. Been in there since I started calling. Okay, so we need to understand dancer training. Some other things: a half sachet, not a rollaway, simply a half sachet. Call from anywhere, I find is going to give the dancers a hard time. Again, this is dancer training. Cross trail through, if not going to your corner, is going to give the dancers a very difficult time. This is another point of dancer training, and that gets into our ball field. Walk and dodge anywhere that the girls are walking instead of the boys. Will give your dancers, you need to give them an extra beat to comprehend what you're giving them. Scoot back from anywhere, and I put in here except from a number 1 or a number 2 waves, and scoot back from anywhere that you're not having boys go in and find boys, girls go in and find girls. If you're having a boy go in and find a girl, and a girl go in and find a boy, you probably need to give an extra beat of lead time so that they can comprehend what you want them to do. Execution time. Please always allow the dancers the number of beats it takes to execute the call. Take a look at the timing list and have a little understanding how those timing lists were arrived at, so that you can judge how you're going to use the timing list. These timing lists were arrived at with repeated observation. This was not a one-time look. There were a lot of looks at these movements before the decision was made how many beats it takes to execute it. They were done with ideal conditions, a good dance floor and good acoustics. There were no listening problems. They were competent callers calling these movements when these timing lists were made up. No surprises or gimmicks. So these timing lists were made with ideal conditions, good callers and good quality dancers, or good qualified dancers. So you need to judge your conditions when you set your timing. Music, using different types of music. Phrase calling, you want to use music with a good downbeat and a lot of phrasing, probably a lot of melody. And phrasing will help with your timing. And the dancers will dance to the phrasing, and you can give key words if you're very careful. I saw one of the most humorous things in my calling career. We were talking with some callers about phrase calling and using the terms up to the middle and back you reel, pass through, and wheel and deal. And the up to the middle and back you reel was giving the dancers a clue what's coming up. And I had a caller said, I've got it. I see just what you're talking about. And the next time he got up to call, he called up to the middle and back you reel, pass through, and bend the line. And he was serious. He had no idea what we were doing here, guys. Okay. If you're doing prompt calling, you're probably using very little phrasing. You're just giving commands. If you're prompt calling, please be very careful of your timing. It's very easy to clip time when you're prompt calling. There is a balancing act between dancing. Understand the difference between dancing and puzzle solving? Perfect timing is lost once you start talking. The best timing, allow the dancers to step off on the first beat. Second best, give them the fifth beat. But please do let the dancers dance on beat. Thank you.
All right.
Is this a quick question, or can we hold it for the end? The question is putting beats into RPMs, namely how many beats of music per minute versus how many revolutions per minute of the turntable, and the answer is no, you can't, because records are all recorded at different rates. You have to measure each record and find out. Typically, some record companies try for 130, some try for 128 at 45 RPM, and others, I think, don't try. What does your company do?
My thing called Friends was recorded at 124. My patter call Orange Blossom Special was recorded at 130. So no, there's no way I can relate RPM to metronome beats per minute.
Well, I'm sure you don't check every record. You said you sing right around 128. I'm sure you don't check every record. So no, but
Some callers do.
I have some callers do, and they will check it with their watch. I have, thankfully, a little bit of a feel. I can feel when a record is around the calling speed that I like. It's just an inherent thing that I have that works well for me. If you don't have that, I suggest you time it with your watch.
I used a metronome for for a long time till I got a built-in body clock, and you do get a feel for it. Jerry, your turn.
all right. Thank you, Don. One of the advantages of coming last is that you see what everybody else has done and cut out of your presentation the other things that they've already covered. So that's what I plan to do. I had planned at one point to get up a square of real boys and real girls, but I don't think we're going to have time to do that. So I've got some example things that I'd like to just go through and have you picture those in your mind. First of all, I'd like to just address again that the reason that we're here is to improve the dance experience through smoothness. How many of you all in here are professional callers? How many of you get paid for what you do when you're calling? I would hope it'd be everybody. How many of you would like to make more money when you're calling? Trouble is, I've heard people that have tried to do that. They're now in jail, making money or running it off the presses. But so the point is that we need to earn the money, and one of the ways we can do that is to increase or improve the dance experience. Of course, what we're talking about here is smoothness. Let me just go through a definition of smoothness that I've gleaned from several different sources. And smoothness is the dance action which allows the dancers to move comfortably without abrupt changes of direction or excessive stops, and with steps that match the beat of the music. And that's really what Wayne and Shawn have been talking about. One of the goals of as callers should be to bring as much smoothness as we can to the dancers. We've talked also here about using non-standard or unfamiliar formations, and of course that will impact the timing and will impact the smoothness. And that's a trade-off. You have to realize when you're doing that when you use these gimmick things, this unfamiliar, non-standard choreography, that it will impact the smoothness and will impact the timing. And there's nothing wrong with that as long as you're using that as a programming tool. Unfortunately, many people use that as an excuse for bad calling. Say, well, I was calling some unfamiliar stuff. It's still our responsibility, I feel, to bring as much smoothness as we can. We've talked a lot also here about timing and tempo, so I'm going to talk more about body flow as part of what we can do to bring more smoothness to the dance experience. Of course, square dancing involves the movement of one dancer in relation to another. And this movement can be a passing action or it can be a turning action either with or without hands. And the element of body flow is critical to bringing smoothness to that dance. In traditional dancing, the smoothness didn't seem to be quite as much of an issue as it is today. And it could be because there were fewer formations, fewer moves, and also a familiarity that the dancers had with the dancing action and the music, so that they could adjust their body flow to the dance action that they knew was coming, and they could make inherently unsmooth choreography look and feel quite smooth because of the familiarity with the formations and the moves. There are moves today that, of course, we've brought a lot of complexity into the new formations and the moves. Consider, for example, spin chain and exchange the gears. In there we've got turning actions, we've got turning stars, and we've got passing actions all in one move. There are other calls which also have this same degree of complexity. And a problem comes in when we start adding these complex moves together, and especially if those moves which follow each other contain the same relative body motion. And that, of course, comes into something that we call overflow. If we had a square, I'd like to go through this, but picture in your mind this sequence from a 0 box. That would be a box that we have if we have the heads or horse sides square through 4. Picture in your mind one of the fellas in this sequence. From that 0 box, we'll touch a quarter, scoot back, boy run, pass the ocean, recycle, veer left, and wheel and deal. As you can imagine, those boys are in a continuous right-hand motion. They've gone through more than 600 degrees of turn in just that short sequence. That can certainly lead to overflow. Let me skip through all that. Within each move, there's not a whole lot that we can do to control the smoothness. The people who write the calls hopefully have taken the time to build some of that in. Some of them haven't, though, because of the choreographic puzzle that might be in that move. Where we can really impact is the transition between moves and sequences, following one call behind the other. And I've written here that the best transition results when body position at the end of one action is exactly where the next action begins. When hands are used in both moves, the ending position of the first move does not make the first hand of the following action unavailable for either the men or the women. What we're saying there is that at the completion of one move, in order to build in smoothness, you want to have the body position at the end of one move in line to start the next move. And if hands are used, to have that hand available. I'll talk a little bit later in some samples that I have of what I'm talking about there. One of the puzzling questions that comes up when we talk about smoothness is the seeming inherent capability of dancers to make unsmooth choreography look smooth. One of those is, again from that 0 box, to touch a quarter, walk and dodge, and partner trade. Now you look at all those 3 moves and you technically put those together of how that would dance. That's got to be unsmooth, especially for the ladies. You do the walk and dodge, they slide. You do the partner trade, they slide back over. In preparation for this at one of my workshop groups, I called that. And at the end of a sequence, I stopped and I said, did anything in there feel unsmooth? And they said no. And I had called that sequence at least twice. Technically, if I look at that, that should not happen. They should say that that is horrible. But it's not. And why? Because part of what Wayne was talking about, anticipation. They've come to anticipate that after that touch a quarter, walk and dodge, many times they're going to get asked to do the partner trade. Okay? One of the other things that they really smooth out is from a sequence of a starting double pass through. The centers are facing each other, square through 3, do a do-sa-do. One of the things that should not happen there, if we've always followed this rule, the rule that we have always heard that right hand moves should not follow right hand moves, right hand moves should not follow right shoulder passes, and left hand's the same thing. Don't use the same hand twice in a row. And yet at the end of the square through 3 hands, we've just used that right hand. And we walk right into a do-sa-do. And again, the right hand, right shoulder should not be smooth. And yet it is. And why? Because at the end of the square through 3/4, they're slightly offset. and can step straight ahead and do their do-sa-do very smoothly. I was going to talk later about the same shoulder passes, but I don't think I'm going to have time to get into that very much more deeply than what I've already said. One of the things also that we've talked to also is, although body flow is important and to follow one move smoothly to the next, as I mentioned before, we destroy that at times when we get into more choreographic difficulty. Because as we add choreographic difficulty, we can definitely interrupt the timing, but we can also interrupt the body flow, more stop and go type of dancing. And again, that's a programming tool that there's nothing wrong with doing that, as long as we recognize that that's what we're doing, and that we consciously make the effort that at this point in my program, I'm going to disrupt the body flow. I'm going to disrupt the timing for the trade-off, for the payoff of this choreographic difficulty. We talked about body adjustments. Wayne also talked about anticipation, another sequence which, if you just look at it technically, should be very unsmooth and very awkward and almost impossible to do, is the very familiar sequence, square through three hands to a left Allemande. How many of you have ever called that? Really? I call it at least once every other week or something. We call that probably every night that we call at least 4 or 5 times, okay? So that's square through three quarters to a left Allemande. When we look at body flow at the end of that square through three quarters, the body position that we're in, we're offset a little bit so we can do that do-sa-do very smoothly, which means it's a right hand, no problem, real smooth. We should not be able to do a square through three quarters. We're offset, ready to pass right shoulders and do a left Allemande. That should not be smooth, and yet it is. It appears smooth, and I've danced it, and it feels smooth to me too, but it shouldn't. And why? Because of the anticipation. We have called, as a group, we have called square from that formation, from that arrangement, square through three quarters to a left Allemande so often that they come to anticipate it, and that's not bad. That's why I think that don't anticipate isn't really what we mean. We don't anticipate unless we want you to anticipate. But we use that sequence, square through left three quarters, look for your corner Allemande left. And there's that excitement that they get when they get that Allemande left. And why? Because of the anticipation. One of the sequences that has always bothered me, and I sort of hesitate to bring this up, I'm going to anyway, is from a static square we do a do paso and then a teacup chain. And I tried this again with my workshop group, and I looked. Part of the problem is with the head men, of course. After that do paso, they're heading in the wrong direction to get to that side lady to turn by the right. So I watched the workshop group, and part of the head men cut the do paso short so that they can be there to turn that side lady. Other head men, rush through the do paso knowing that they've got to get over there and get a hold of that side lady. So one of the sequences that would help to smooth that out, because no matter how many times I've seen that called, the head men seem to adjust in one of those two ways, neither one of which appear to be smooth. So what I would do in that sequence is change the lead-in call from a do paso to four ladies chain twice, and then do the teacup chain from there. So I've got a bunch of timing stuff here. I think that we pretty well covered that. A couple of words that I would like to say on timing. Of course, the goal of the timing is to deliver the moves so that they can react at the end of one call and move right smoothly into the next call. One of the unfortunate things about timing, I believe, is that most people who have good timing have not really spent a lot of time looking at the technical aspects of what builds in good timing. It seems that if you have good timing, you know it. Sometimes you have bad timing and think you have good timing. If people come up to you and say, that was good, especially people who don't dance to you a lot, and say, you're really smooth, I really like the timing that you got, you can be rest assured that you probably do have good timing. I would suggest that each of us tape ourselves and dance to ourselves and take a feel and see if, in fact, we are calling smoothly. Enough on that. The problem that I was trying to get to there is that because the people who do call smoothly now have a difficult time trying to explain how they got to where they are, how they got to that smooth timing. And that's why I really appreciate the words that Wayne said, and in the caller curriculum guidelines, it goes through those technical aspects, the lead time, the execution time, those things, so we can study those and practice those. I'll say just a few words about tempo because we've pretty well covered that subject also. But at that tempo workshop that was in November, the inside joke there is that we were talking this morning, Shawn and Don and I, and we were talking about whether we're going to talk about this tempo workshop. And I says, well, I've read the paper that Jim put out, and you guys were there. Maybe you'd like to. I said, no, you go ahead and do it. And I said, okay. And Don says, yeah, we did this workshop last summer, wasn't it? No, it was November. So, but anyway, it sounded like a super idea. There were 5 callers who got together as 3.5 squares. The ages ranged from 30 to about 75, and the dancing experience from 3 years to 30 years. So you can see there's a wide range of experience and ages there. They did various experiments, and I'll not go through the whole thing. If you would like to get a copy of the paper, see me after the session here, and I'll get your name and try to get you a copy one way or another. But the various experiments that they tried all 5 callers calling to the same tempo, some using just prompts, some using filler words. They had the dancers just move by themselves. They had the dancers promenading to a taped session or a segment that ranged from like 115 to 130. And it seemed like the dancers agreed on or settled down to about 120 beats per minute. So that sounds like about where the comfortable speed was. It turned out also that the difference between timing and tempo, you can take a record set at a specific tempo, and by changing the timing, that is the time of your delivery, to cut down the lead time, to cut down the delivery time, the command time, that you can increase the sensation of speed in the dancers without actually increasing the tempo. We found, or in the workshop, and I've experienced this myself, that even if you just leave the tempo the same, singing calls is a good place to do this, where you want to build to an excitement at the end of the call, at the end of the record. Leave the tempo the same, but in the beginning of the dance, use perhaps a little stretched out timing, a little more command time, a little more lead time, and then at the end of the dance, thanks a lot. Don just passed me the I thought that was my score. He said he gave me a 2. That's 2 minutes ago. Okay, well that's not bad then. But if toward the beginning of the record we have a stretched out command time and lead times, and then toward the end of the singing call, start clipping that timing just a little bit to build that excitement, to build that sensation of speed. Their feet might not be moving any faster. They probably will build a little bit though, but the sensation of speed is going to be there, and they'll have that excitement at the very end, just where you want them. Again, tempo has a very strong effect on the feel of the dance. Even more influence is the interaction between tempo and timing. They're not the same thing. The tempo is the beat of the music, and the timing is how we deliver those calls. Have a whole section here on hand availability that I'm not going to go through. The last thing that again I'd like to say, smoothness is very subjective and is very different in different situations. I would suggest tape yourself, dance to yourself, try to picture that this is some other caller, and then rate that caller on his or her timing. Thank you very much. Here's Don.
Thank you, Jerry. Our time is up, but I do want to throw in just a comment or two about this tempo workshop. It's been interesting to me. I've had the opportunity to talk to Shawn a little bit and hear what his thoughts were on the workshop here. Having read Jim's thing and having Jerry review it verbally, and knowing what my feeling was as we left it, there was nothing that was black and white. This is good, this is bad, what have you. Each of us came out with I think, a different thing of what we learned from it. First of all, Wayne said typical tempos are 124 to 130, 130 pushing it. We found that most of the callers there were calling 118 to 120, and that the dancer's sensitivity to a change in tempo wasn't as great as I thought. From 118 to 128 wasn't that big a difference to what they felt. A much bigger, and this is one of the things I got out of it, I'm not sure Shawn and Jim agree, but one of the things that affects dancers much more than the actual tempo is, and it's a word that I think all three of you use, is the perceived tempo. If I use real exciting music with a lot of enthusiasm slowly, they're going to think it's faster than if I use a lot of fast music in a boring way. It's the perceived tempo that made a much bigger difference than the actual tempo. When we finally all did a tip together for them, I think we settled on 118 or 120, and the dancers loved it. It was an interesting session. I hope you guys felt this was an interesting session. I'd like to again thank, and have you guys help me thank Shawn Cuddy, Wayne Morvent, Jerry Reed. Thank you guys for coming. Coffee break time.